The unusual agreement. Dr. Ethan Carter had seen many strange things in his life, but nothing like this. Sitting across from him in his small research lab was Zur, an alien unlike any creature on Earth. Zur's skin shimmered like silver water, changing color with every small movement. Their large, dark eyes studied Ethan with quiet intensity. Zur had arrived on Earth by accident. Their ship malfunctioned, crashing in a remote desert, far from human eyes. Ethan, a biologist working on extraterrestrial studies, had been the first to find them. Instead of reporting Zur to the authorities, he decided to help. Over the weeks, they had learned from each other, sharing knowledge about their species, their worlds, their ways of life. But nothing could have prepared Ethan for what Zur said that night. "I want to understand human reproduction," Zur said in a calm, measured voice. "I want to test it." Ethan almost choked on his coffee. He coughed, blinking in surprise. "I'm sorry, you want to do what?" Zur tilted their head, their silver-blue skin rippling. "Your species reproduces differently from mine. I have studied your books, watched your media, and examined your biology, but I do not understand the experience." Ethan rubbed his temples. "Okay, let's start with this. Why do you need to know?" Zur leaned forward slightly. "My species does not reproduce the way humans do. We transfer genetic imprints through thought. It is efficient, fast, and requires no physical connection. But your species, your method is complicated. You mix DNA, grow new life inside a body, feel emotions, love, attachment, sacrifice. It is fascinating." Ethan hesitated. This was dangerous territory. "Zur, humans don't just reproduce for science. It's personal, emotional, not just biological." Zur nodded. "That is what I wish to understand. I do not have human emotions, but I want to. I want to feel what it means to create life." Ethan frowned. "You're not asking to actually have a baby, right?" Zur's eyes darkened. "No, I only wish to test the process, to understand what happens inside a human body during reproduction. If my species could experience emotions like humans do, we might evolve in ways we never imagined." Ethan exhaled. "All right. So, how do you plan to test it?" Zur was silent for a moment. Then they placed one long-fingered hand on the table. "Your DNA is stored in every cell of your body. If I interact with it, I may be able to replicate the process without physical reproduction." Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. "You mean you want to absorb human DNA?" Zur nodded. "I believe my body can simulate the changes. If I do this, I may learn what it means to be human." Ethan shook his head. "That's insane. Your body isn't made for this. What if something goes wrong? What if you change in ways you can't reverse?" Zur's voice was calm. "That is a risk I am willing to take." Ethan stared at Zur, his heart pounding. He had spent years studying alien life, hoping to understand what made humanity unique. Now, an alien was asking to experience it firsthand. Zur tilted their head. "You fear this idea." "Of course I do." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "You don't know what will happen. I don't know what will happen. You could mutate, or worse, die." Zur studied him for a long moment. "Human scientists take risks for knowledge every day. I am willing to take this risk. The question is, will you help me?" Ethan felt a strange pressure in his chest. This was more than an experiment. This was a turning point. If Zur succeeded, it could change everything they knew about life, about evolution, about what it meant to be human. And yet, something deep inside him whispered that this was dangerous. After a long silence, Ethan exhaled. "If we do this, we do it safely. Step by step. No risks we can't control." Zur's eyes shimmered. "Agreed." Ethan stood up. "All right. Tomorrow, we start with the simplest test. No direct contact, just exposure to human DNA in a controlled setting. Zir gave a slow, deliberate nod. I look forward to it. As Ethan turned off the lights and prepared for bed, one thought wouldn't leave his mind. What if this experiment worked? And worse, what if it worked too well? An experiment unlike any other. The next morning, Dr. Ethan Carter stood in his small, makeshift laboratory, staring at the cold metal examination table. His fingers drummed against the counter, his mind racing with uncertainty. This is a mistake. The thought nagged at him, but he pushed it away. He had already agreed. Zir sat across from him, their silver-blue skin shifting like liquid metal under the bright lab lights. They seemed calm, patient, their deep black eyes studying every movement Ethan made. "Are you ready?" Ethan finally asked. Zir gave a slow nod. "Yes, begin the test." Ethan sighed and reached for a sealed container. Inside, a simple swab of human skin cells rested on a sterile glass slide. It was harmless, just a fragment of biological material, nothing more. "We start slow," Ethan muttered. "You don't touch me. You don't directly absorb anything. We observe what happens when you interact with human DNA at a molecular level." Zir's expression remained unreadable. "Understood." Ethan placed the glass slide under a high-powered microscope. He adjusted the lens, watching the tiny skin cells up close. They looked ordinary, just human tissue, no different from the countless samples he had studied before. "Now," he said, glancing at Zir, "extend your energy field, but do not make physical contact." Zir raised their hand, their long, elegant fingers stretching forward. A faint glow pulsed from their palm, almost invisible, like a ripple in the air. Ethan shivered. He had seen Zir use this ability before, manipulating objects without touching them. But this time, something different happened. The human skin cells reacted. Ethan gasped as the cells on the glass slide began to shift, move, divide at an unnatural speed. The microscope screen flickered with new readings, a rapid acceleration of mitosis, cell replication at an impossible rate. "That's not normal," Ethan whispered. "What are you doing?" Zir's eyes narrowed. "I am not controlling it. The cells, they are responding to me." Ethan turned dials frantically, capturing the data. The cells weren't just growing, they were changing. The once clear human cells were merging, their structure altering before his eyes. Then, in an instant, they stopped. The glow around Zir's hand flickered and faded. The cells went completely still. Ethan leaned forward, his breath shallow. What just happened? Zir looked at him, something new in their expression. "I felt something." Ethan frowned. "Felt? What?" Zir flexed their fingers, staring at them like they belonged to someone else. "A pull. A connection. For a moment, I was inside the cells." Asterisk, asterisk. Their voice wavered slightly, something Ethan had never heard before. A chill ran down his spine. "Inside them. What does that mean?" Zir's skin flickered strangely, their form momentarily unstable, shifting between different textures. Ethan had seen this before. Asterisk, asterisk, their species could alter their molecular structure at will. But this was different. It was uncontrolled. "I do not know," Zir admitted, "but I want to go further." Ethan exhaled sharply. He knew this was a line he shouldn't cross, but curiosity, the very thing that made him a scientist, was pulling him forward. "Fine," he said, trying to steady his voice. "But we take it one step at a time. No direct fusion, just observation." Zir tilted their head. "What do you propose?" Ethan reached for another sample, a small vial of his own blood, taken for control experiments. He hesitated before setting it on the counter. "This is human blood," Ethan explained. "If your body reacts to skin cells, let's see what happens with something more complex." Zir regarded the vial with quiet intrigue. Then, without a word, they reached out again. The glow returned, stronger this time. The air crackled. Ethan's hair stood on end. And then, the blood inside the vial moved. Ethan froze, staring at the impossible sight. The red liquid swirled, separating into its components, each cell rearranging itself as if responding to an invisible force. Then came the most terrifying part. The blood changed color. The deep crimson of human blood turned a shimmering silver, like liquid metal, just like Zur's skin. Ethan stumbled back. What the hell is happening? Zur lowered their hand, trembling slightly. Their gaze locked onto Ethan's, and for the first time, Ethan saw something strange in those dark, alien eyes. Emotion. Zur was afraid. "Dr. Carter," Zur said slowly, their voice barely a whisper, "I think I am changing." A cold wave of dread washed over Ethan. He looked at the blood sample again, still glowing with that unnatural silver hue. This was no simple experiment anymore. Something had begun, and he had no idea how to stop it. The unexpected trial. Ethan stared at the vial of shimmering, silver blood. His mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. Human blood doesn't do that. Yet there it was, his own biological sample, once deep red, now pulsing with an unnatural metallic glow, shifting and changing, as if it were alive in a way it wasn't before. His hands trembled as he adjusted the microscope. His breath hitched as he zoomed in, examining the altered blood cells on the screen. Impossible. The once human cells were no longer human. They had changed, morphed into something new, something in between. The distinct structure of human DNA had fused with an unknown element, rewriting itself. Ethan spun around to face Sire. The alien was unusually still, their large black eyes fixed on the vial. Their skin flickered between silver and pale blue, their form trembling, shifting in small ripples. They were unstable. "Zur, what's happening to you?" Ethan demanded. Zur lifted their hand, staring at it with an eerie curiosity. "I feel strange." Define strange. Zur exhaled, a sound that was almost human. "I feel heat, a pulse. I feel." They paused, struggling for the right word. "Different." Ethan took a step closer. "Did you absorb my blood?" Zur shook their head. "Not in the way you think. I did not take it into my body. But when I connected with it, it connected with me." Ethan's heart pounded. "That's not how biology works, Sire. Blood doesn't just link with someone telepathically. Your species has never reacted to human DNA before. Why now?" Zur blinked. Their silver-blue skin rippled again, flashing in irregular patterns. Ethan noticed something deeply unsettling. Zur's body was becoming less stable. Before, their form was fluid but controlled. Now, they flickered between shapes, struggling to hold themselves together. "It is inside me," Zur finally whispered. "I can feel it. I can feel you." Ethan's stomach dropped. What the hell does that mean? His mind screamed at him to stop, to shut everything down, to quarantine Zur. But the scientist in him, the part that wanted to understand the unknown, refused to back away. He took a deep breath. "Okay, we need data. If your body is reacting to human DNA, we need to know how far it's going." Zur gave a slow, cautious nod. "Yes, we must continue." The next step, the test subject. Ethan moved carefully, pulling out a sample of lab-grown human tissue, completely disconnected from any living body. This was their next test. If Zur's influence had changed blood, would it do the same to other human cells? He placed the tissue sample inside a sterile containment box. No direct contact, just observation, he reminded. Zur nodded and reached out, their fingers hovering over the sample. The moment their energy field touched it, the tissue reacted. Ethan watched in frozen shock as the cells stretched, grew, divided rapidly, far faster than anything natural. Then came the horrifying part. The tissue moved. It pulsed as if it had a heartbeat. Ethan's mouth went dry. "Zur, stop." Zur didn't move. Their body was shaking now, their form flickering between alien and something disturbingly human. I cannot. The tissue inside the containment box kept changing, spreading, stretching in ways human biology wasn't supposed to. Ethan slammed his fist against the emergency shutoff, sealing the sample in a containment field. The tissue finally stopped moving. But it was too late. Ethan looked up at Zur, and his breath caught in his throat. Zur had changed. Their silver-blue skin was no longer just alien. Streaks of human flesh-toned patches had begun forming along their arms and neck. But the most terrifying part, their eyes had changed. Zur's large, black, featureless eyes were no longer fully alien. Inside them, Ethan saw something he had never seen before. Pupils, irises, a human gaze. Ethan, Zur's voice cracked. What is happening to me? The side effects begin. Ethan grabbed his scanner, moving it over Zur's body. The readings made no sense. Zur's molecular structure was shifting at an uncontrollable rate. Your DNA, Ethan breathed. It's not just reacting to human genetics. It's fusing. Zur shuddered, gripping the table. Their hands, once smooth and alien, now had the beginning of human fingerprints. I can hear something, Zur whispered. Something inside me. Ethan felt his pulse hammering in his ears. What do you hear? Zur looked up, their expression unreadable. Your memories. The room went deathly silent. Ethan's blood ran cold. What did you just say? Zur clutched their chest. I see things that are not mine. A place with books, a small house, a woman with brown eyes calling her name. Emily. Ethan staggered backward as if he'd been hit. Emily. His ex-girlfriend. Someone Zur shouldn't even know existed. How? How do you know that? Ethan demanded. Zur's voice trembled. I do not know. But I am certain. Dr. Carter. Their hands clenched into fists. Their human-like skin rippled and changed again. A part of you is inside me now. Ethan felt something in his chest tighten. This experiment was no longer just about science. Something far more dangerous had begun. And there was no way to stop it now. The strange transformation. The air in the lab felt heavy, thick with the weight of something unnatural. Ethan stood frozen, his heart pounding as Zur clutched their chest, their body rippling between alien fluidity and disturbingly human form. Ethan had seen alien biology do incredible things before, but nothing like this. Zur, listen to me, Ethan said, forcing himself to stay calm. We need to stop whatever is happening to you. Zur lifted their head, and Ethan felt his stomach twist. Their eyes were fully human now, deep brown, just like his. They weren't just shifting in form. They were becoming him. I do not understand, Zur whispered. I am remembering things I have never seen. I can feel emotions I have never known. Fear, hope, guilt. Ethan took a step back, his mind spinning with questions. Was Zur copying him, mutating into a version of him? Or was something far worse happening? You said you could hear my memories, Ethan pressed. What else do you see? Zur closed their eyes. When they spoke, their voice wasn't quite their own anymore. It had traces of Ethan's tone, his cadence. I see Earth. I see a childhood, scraped knees, and laughter. I see your mother. A woman with kind eyes. She sings to you at night. Ethan's blood ran cold. There was no way Zur could know that. Zur, stop. But Zur wasn't listening. Their fingers flexed, curling like a human's, their breathing uneven. I feel something heavy inside me. Zur's voice trembled. A weight in my chest. Is this sadness? Ethan was shaking now. Zur was absorbing more than just DNA. They were absorbing his memories, his emotions, his humanity, and it was breaking them. The pain of being human. Zur suddenly staggered, collapsing against the counter. A sharp gasp tore from their throat. Their once fluid body struggled to hold form, their skin flickering between alien iridescence and patches of human flesh. They were fighting something inside themselves. "Ethan," Zur gasped. "It hurts." Ethan rushed forward, panic clawing at his chest. "Where? What's happening?" Zur's hands clutched at their chest, their fingers trembling. "Inside, I can feel a beat, a pulse. Asterisk, asterisk." Ethan's heart nearly stopped. "A heartbeat." Zur nodded weakly. "It is not mine. It is yours." Ethan's breath came in short, ragged bursts. This wasn't just a biological shift. Zur was developing an actual human heart. Their body was trying to become something it wasn't meant to be. Zur suddenly gasped again, gripping their head. Their face twisted, an expression Ethan had never seen on them before, raw emotion. "There is so much," they whispered, their voice shaking. "So much inside me. I do not understand how humans live like this. The weight of your memories, the depth of your emotions, it is unbearable." A heavy silence filled the lab. Ethan swallowed hard. For the first time, Zur was experiencing what it meant to be human. Not just physically, but emotionally. And they were drowning in it. The breaking point. The monitors beeped wildly as Ethan tried to make sense of the readings. Zur's body was shutting down. Their alien biology was rejecting the transformation, fighting to return to its original state. But something wasn't letting it. Something inside Zur wanted to hold on. "Ethan." Zur's voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "Am I dying?" Ethan's throat tightened. He didn't know the answer. "Stay with me," he said, gripping Zur's shoulders. "You need to stabilize. We'll fix this. I promise." Zur's gaze flickered up to meet his, and in that moment, Ethan saw something that made his heart ache. Tears. A single tear slipped down Zur's cheek, a purely human reaction. "I do not wish to die," Zur admitted. "For the first time, I understand what life truly is." Ethan's breath hitched. Zur, a being that had never known emotions, never experienced mortality, was now afraid of losing what they had just gained. They were afraid of death. And that meant they had truly become human. A dangerous choice. Ethan knew they had minutes, maybe seconds, before Zur's body collapsed under the weight of the transformation. There was only one option. Reverse the process. He grabbed a syringe, filling it with a neutralizing agent, something that might purge the foreign DNA and return Zur to their original form. But then Zur grabbed his wrist. Their grip was weak, trembling, but their human-like fingers curled around his arm. "Do not erase me," Zur whispered. Ethan froze. "What?" Zur's expression was raw with something Ethan had never seen in them before. Desperation. "If you remove this, I will return to what I was. I will forget all of this. I will forget you." Ethan felt his chest tighten. Zur didn't want to lose their humanity. But if they didn't, they might die. Ethan was faced with an impossible choice. Erase the transformation, restore Zur to their alien self, and erase everything they had learned. Or let Zur continue evolving into something new, something that might not survive. Ethan's grip on the syringe tightened. He had to choose. Fast. The dangerous side effect. The syringe trembled in Ethan's grip, his knuckles white from the pressure. His mind raced, but he had no time to think, only seconds to act. Across from him, Zur lay on the medical table, barely holding their form together. Their silver-blue skin flickered, shifting between alien fluidity and disturbingly human textures. Their chest rose and fell unevenly, their breathing shallow, and their eyes, once black and endless, were now entirely human, brown, like Ethan's. They were becoming something else, or someone else. "Ethan," Zur whispered. Their voice cracked. "If you inject me, I will forget this. I will return to what I was. But I do not want to lose this. I do not want to lose you." Ethan's throat tightened. Zir was afraid. This wasn't just a scientific anomaly anymore. This was a life, a soul. If he injected Zir now, they would survive, but at the cost of everything they had become. If he did nothing, they might die, but as something new, something truly alive. The weight of the decision crushed him. He had spent his life studying extraterrestrial life, but never had he expected an alien to become something more than just a subject. Never had he expected to care. The choice. Ethan's heartbeat thundered in his ears. There had to be another way. He took a deep breath and set the syringe down. "I won't erase you," he said firmly, "but we have to stabilize you." Zir's lips parted in surprise. "You would risk this?" Ethan nodded. "We started this together. I won't let you die for it." He rushed to the console, typing furiously, scanning Zir's molecular structure. There had to be a way to slow the transformation. Then he saw it. Zir's DNA wasn't just fusing with human genetics. It was adapting. The instability wasn't just because of the transformation. It was because Zir's body was resisting the emotional overload. Zir's species was never meant to feel. They had no concept of joy, pain, sorrow, or love. But now, Zir was experiencing all of it at once. Their body could handle the genetic shift. It was their mind that was breaking. Emotions can kill. Ethan turned to Zir, his pulse racing. "Your body is adapting, but your mind is rejecting the emotional flood. That's what's killing you." Zir shuddered. "It is too much. The weight of memories, of guilt, of happiness, it is endless." Ethan clenched his fists. Zir was feeling everything a human felt, without the natural ability to cope. It was like being thrown into the middle of a storm with no way to protect themselves. They were drowning in emotions. "You have to fight it," Ethan said urgently. "Your body is strong enough, but your mind. Zir, you have to want to live." Zir trembled, their fingers curling around the edge of the table. How? How do humans endure this chaos inside them? Ethan's voice softened. "We don't endure it alone." He reached out, pressing his palm against Zir's hand. Their fingers were warm now, no longer cold and smooth, but textured with human-like skin. Zir was no longer just an alien. They were something in between. And Ethan had never been more afraid, for both of them. The fight to survive. The machines beeped wildly. Zir's vitals were dropping. They were slipping, falling deeper into the emotional storm. Ethan tightened his grip. "Zir, listen to me. You have to hold on. You have to separate what's real from what's memory. Focus on the present. Focus on this moment." Zir's lips parted as a tear slipped down their cheek. Their hands trembled in Ethan's grasp. "I do not want to die," they whispered again. Ethan swallowed hard. "Then fight for it." Zir's form flickered violently, their body rejecting the transformation and embracing it at the same time. And then, the lights in the lab flickered. Zir let out a choked gasp, their back arching, their skin flashing between silver, blue, human flesh, light, darkness. And then, stillness. The aftermath. Ethan held his breath, staring at Zir's motionless form. The machines, silent. The lab, quiet. For a terrifying moment, he thought he had lost them. Then, Zir exhaled. Their eyes fluttered open. And they were different. No longer flickering between forms. No longer unstable. They looked human. Fully. Completely. Their silver-blue alien glow had faded, replaced with skin that was warm to the touch. A steady heartbeat. Ethan took a step forward. "Zir." Zir sat up slowly. Their expression, no longer unreadable, no longer cold. Their lips parted slightly, and they spoke in a voice that sounded wholly, beautifully, and heartbreakingly human. "Ethan, I think I am alive. The ultimate choice. Ethan stood frozen, his breath coming in shallow gasps as he stared at the figure before him. Zir sat upright on the examination table, their form no longer shifting, no longer unstable. The transformation had finished, and the result was impossible. Zir was human, not just in appearance, but completely. Their once fluid silver-blue skin had solidified into warm flesh, veins, muscles, fingerprints. Their glowing, featureless eyes were now deep brown, filled with something Ethan had never seen in them before, true emotion. They blinked slowly, adjusting to the dim light of the lab. Then, Zir exhaled, and Ethan's heart nearly stopped, because it was a completely human breath. No strange vibrations, no otherworldly resonance, just the steady, controlled rise and fall of a human chest. A new beginning, or a terrible mistake. Ethan's mind raced, struggling to process what had just happened. Zir had been alien. They weren't anymore. How? Human biology shouldn't have been compatible with Zir's species. Their DNA was fundamentally different. Their bodies functioned on molecular principles completely alien to Earth. Yet the moment Zir had interacted with his DNA, something impossible had begun. Something that had never happened in the history of human science. A true cross-species evolution. Ethan had read theories about interspecies genetic fusion. They were fantasy, science fiction. But Zir wasn't fiction. Zir was real. And now, so was the question Ethan had feared from the start. What happens next? Zir's first moments as a human. Zir turned their hands over, staring at their own fingers. Slowly, they flexed them. A simple movement. But to them, a revelation. Strange, Zir whispered, their voice softer, more human than before. They reached up, pressing a palm against their chest. I feel everything. Ethan swallowed. How do you feel? Zir was silent for a long moment, as if searching for the right words. Finally, they said, small. Ethan frowned. Small. Zir nodded, their brows furrowing in an expression that was completely, undeniably human. Before, I was infinite, they said slowly. My species does not exist in singular forms. We are one and many. We are connected. Ethan listened carefully, fascinated but also deeply unsettled. But now, I am only me, Zir continued. My mind is quiet. I cannot hear my people anymore. There is only this body. Their hands trembled slightly. It is lonely. Ethan's chest tightened. Lonely. An emotion no Zir had ever experienced before. They weren't just physically different. Their mind had changed too. Zir was no longer part of a collective consciousness. They had become something entirely individual. They had become human in ways Ethan hadn't even considered. The cost of being human. Zir lifted their head, their eyes filled with something new, something unmistakable. Fear. Ethan, have I lost myself? Ethan hesitated. How could he answer that? Zir had always been fluid, ever-changing, limitless. Now they were bound by the limitations of a human form. Their once immortal body was now fragile. They could get sick. They could bleed. They could die. For the first time, Zir was experiencing the weight of mortality. Ethan took a slow breath. I don't think you've lost yourself. Zir watched him carefully. Then, what have I become? Ethan's jaw clenched. That was the question, wasn't it? Was Zir still an alien? Or were they something else now? Something new? Zir pressed a hand to their chest again, feeling their own heartbeat, a muscle that had never existed in them before, a rhythm they had never known. I can feel time, they murmured. Ethan's brows furrowed. What do you mean? Zir's fingers trembled slightly. Before, my species did not measure time like humans. We existed all at once. No past, no future, only now. Their voice faltered. But now, I feel it moving. I feel the seconds passing. I feel an end. Ethan realized what they were saying. Zir could now feel the weight of time, of aging, of an inevitable death. They had never been meant to exist in this state. They had never been meant to be human. And yet, here they were. The consequence of choice. Ethan stepped closer, placing a steadying hand on Zir's shoulder. Their skin was warm now. Alive. Zir's breath hitched slightly. Their gaze lifted to meet his, filled with something achingly human. "Do I regret this?" Zir asked quietly. Ethan swallowed hard. "Do you?" Zir hesitated. Then they shook their head. "No." A pause. Then a single tear slipped down their cheek. A real tear. Zir reached up, startled, touching their own face. Their voice shook. "What is this?" Ethan exhaled, his own emotions catching up to him. "You're crying." Zir blinked rapidly, confused. "But why?" Ethan offered a small, sad smile. "Because you're human now." Zir closed their eyes, their breathing deep, controlled. Then, slowly, they smiled. It was soft, small, hesitant. But it was real. For the first time, Zir wasn't just understanding humanity. They were living it. The final question. Ethan knew that this was only the beginning. Zir had crossed a boundary that no being had ever crossed before. They had become the first of their kind. A being-born alien, but now human. But the biggest question remained. What would the universe think of this? If Zir's people found out, if the rest of humanity discovered what had happened here, what would they do? Was this an evolution? A miracle? A disaster? Ethan had no answers. All he knew was this. Zir was no longer an experiment. They were a person. And that changed everything. A new beginning. The lad was silent except for the rhythmic hum of machines and the faint, steady sound of Zir's breathing. Ethan sat across from them, his mind still reeling from the impossible reality before him. Zir, an alien who had once been part of a vast, interconnected species, fluid and ever-changing, was now entirely human. Not just in appearance, but in mind, body, and soul. And that terrified Ethan more than anything. The first steps of a new life. Zir flexed their fingers, staring at the lines of their own human hands as if they were some kind of strange artifact. They traced their fingers along the table, feeling the cool metal surface. Feeling. Everything felt new, the rough texture of their skin, the small imperfections of their body, the weight of their own breath in their chest. And most of all, the heartbeat. The slow, rhythmic thump-thump, thump-thump in their chest was the most alien sensation they had ever encountered. They pressed a hand against their chest and looked at Ethan with wide, vulnerable eyes. "I will never stop hearing it, will I?" Ethan shook his head. "No, it's part of you now." Zir exhaled sharply. "It is loud." Ethan chuckled softly, though his mind was still overwhelmed by the enormity of what had happened. Zir was alive. Not in the way they once were. Not as an alien, a being of shifting molecules and interconnected thought, but as a single, breathing, mortal human. And they had no idea what to do next. The fear of the unknown. Zir suddenly tensed, their fingers tightening into fists. Ethan frowned. "What's wrong?" Zir hesitated. "I do not know what happens next." Ethan's chest tightened. Neither did he. The scientific implications alone were staggering. Zir had undergone something that defied every known law of biology, physics, and evolution. And if the world found out about them, if humanity discovered that an alien had become human, there was no telling what would happen. Would they see Zir as a miracle, or as a threat? Zir must have seen the worry in his face because they spoke again, their voice soft, hesitant. "Ethan, am I meant to exist like this?" Ethan inhaled sharply. That was the real question, wasn't it? What had happened here had never been done before. There was no precedent, no blueprint. Zir had entered a new state of being. A form of life that had never existed before. An alien-born human. What will the universe think? Ethan leaned forward. Zyre, do you regret it? Zero was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, they shook their head. No. They let out a shaky breath, their new human fingers running through their short hair, another thing that felt strange to them. For the first time, I understand what it means to be alive. I feel complete. Ethan studied them carefully. But Zira's gaze darkened slightly. But what happens if my people find me? A chill ran down Ethan's spine. What if they did? Zira's species had never known individuality. They had never been separate. What would they do if they realized that one of their own had transformed? Would they see it as a betrayal, a failure, an abomination? Or worse, would they try to undo it? We don't know how they'll react, Ethan admitted. Maybe they'll accept it, or maybe they'll try to take you back. Zira shivered. I do not want to go back. Their voice was so soft, so human, that it sent a wave of emotion through Ethan's chest. Zira didn't just want to survive. They wanted to live. Leaving the lab, a world awaits. Ethan made his decision. Then we'll keep you safe. Zira looked up sharply. How? Ethan exhaled, pushing away his fear. We'll get you out of here. We'll give you a new identity. A new life. Zyre blinked. A human life. Ethan nodded. Yes. Zira hesitated. But I do not know how to be human. Ethan smirked slightly. No one really does. We just figure it out as we go. A small smile touched Zyre's lips, the first genuine human expression they had ever made. And just like that, they weren't an experiment anymore. They were a person with a future. The final test, walking among humans. Hours later, Ethan led Zira out of the lab for the first time. They were dressed in human clothes now, simple jeans and a hoodie, things that Ethan had thrown together. It felt strange, seeing them look so normal. As they stepped outside, Zyre inhaled deeply. The night air was cool, the city lights blinking in the distance. Zira turned to Ethan, wonder in their eyes. I can smell the rain. Ethan smiled. Welcome to being human. They walked through the streets, and no one gave them a second glance. No one knew that the person beside Ethan had once been an alien being of pure energy and intelligence. Now, they were just another face in the crowd. For the first time, Zira was truly human. The final question. As they walked, Zira suddenly spoke again. Ethan. Ethan glanced at them. Yeah. Zira hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, they asked, what does love feel like? Ethan felt his heart stop for a second. It was such a simple question. But coming from Zira, someone who had never even known what emotions were, it was the most profound thing Ethan had ever heard. He exhaled softly. It's complicated. Zira gave him a small, knowing smile. Then I would like to understand it. Ethan laughed quietly, shaking his head. You're going to be the most human who ever lived, aren't you? Zira's smile widened, and for the first time, they didn't look like an experiment. They looked like a person ready to live. And as they disappeared into the streets of Earth, Ethan knew. Humanity had just changed forever.